No one wants to go no contact. I can't say and emphasize that enough. No one actually wants to go no contact. It is the last resort for self-preservation and safety. Even in preparing for this video, I was asking myself if I was exaggerating or making a big deal out of nothing. And of course, that's my mother's voice, right? That's not mine, but the hard wiring, the conditioning, self-gaslighting is still there. After decades in the shadows, today I'm sharing about how and why I went no contact and started my healing and recovery journey. But this conversation ain't for everybody. This conversation is for you if you're a Black woman with a stressed, strained, estranged, toxic, or otherwise complicated relationship with your mother. This conversation is for you if you think your mother might be toxic or narcissistic and you feel alone and isolated. This conversation is for you if you feel ashamed, guilty, embarrassed, even speaking or thinking critically about your mother. This conversation is for you if you feel isolated and alone because she's your only parent and you don't want to risk possibly losing her. This conversation is for you if you don't want to be any more alone than you already are. Welcome. My name is Elle, and I help high-achieving women escape the rat race and recover from burnout by redefining success on their own terms so that life can feel as good as it looks without exhaustion, burnout, or overwork. I'm also the creator of the Success Reset coaching program, as well as School of the Well-Rested, and I've been doing this work for over 25 years. But today's conversation is a little bit different because I'm sharing about my personal experience discovering and healing and recovering from having a toxic mother who also happens to be a covert narcissist. Please like, comment, subscribe before we get started. My hope is that you will hear pieces of your story in my story, which will help you heal and recover and reclaim your life and your agency and your sovereignty so that you can get out from the shadows and the golden handcuffs or the golden cage of narcissistic mothers, neglect or abuse and trauma, and start actually creating the life that you desire on your own terms, because you deserve the life that you want right here and right now. But trigger warning. If you are triggered by Black women with disposable income or multi-generational money, this might not be the conversation for you, because I'm going to be talking about financial abuse, manipulation, and money, which I know can be a touchy subject. And before we even get deep into the nooks and crannies, because I'm spilling all my tea, I got receipts, I got all kinds of things to show and tell you and talk about today. If you post a comment about, I wish my mother had paid for X, Y, and Z, at least you had X, Y, and Z, or any other form of gaslighting?
Absolutely not. That's a full-on no.
I will delete your comment and block you from this channel. I'm not going back and forth with anyone in the comments about anything. I've had enough gaslighting to last me the rest of this life and several lifetimes ahead. So fair warning. Now let's dive into the conversation. My mother is a very successful, highly accomplished, well-connected, generous, warm, well-liked, well-respected woman. But behind closed doors, I lived a very different story. The private life was much more complex and challenging. Even though I know it's a conversation that I want to have, that I'm excited to share, I also recognize that speaking critically about one's Black mother is considered blasphemous. It's taboo. There is a big stigma to go no contact or be estranged from your mother as a Black daughter, especially. Girl code that we don't talk about or criticize our mothers, especially not in public or in mixed company. And I'm having this conversation with you anyway, because we need to stop holding the silences, we need to stop holding the secrecy, and we need to stop holding the shame. It's time to give voice to our lives and our experiences, even if the trauma has to do with our Black mothers. It's essential for us to have these conversations, to be honest, in order to break these harmful cycles and start healing for real ourselves, our future generations, and our past generations who were not able to have these conversations and still experience trauma with their Black moms. The stories I'm going to tell you today about my mother's narcissism are not obvious. They're not yelling and screaming. They're not public humiliation with loud making a scene or having to be the center of attention in the most overt ways that you would imagine. That's why she's a covert narcissist. It's like walking into a spider web and not knowing where things are or how to get clear or how to take things off of your face, because it just feels like it's everywhere. And it takes time to recognize the toxicity, recognize the patterns, and remove yourself from it, because it's so subversive and it's so ingrained into everything. When you have a covert narcissist, it's not something you can actually pinpoint because it is woven into everything. And there's so many nuances. My mother plays the long game. It's a long rope. It's a big golden cage. I didn't grow up getting spanked. I got lectures. Some people whose parents abused them financially by not giving them any money or by taking out credit in their name. That wasn't my experience. Go on this journey with me. I'm building the reality for you piece by piece by piece, so you can really understand the context and the framework and the world that I was living in. But in sum, if I had to distill it down to just a few sentences, the public perception was more important than healing, transforming, fixing, addressing the private chaos. And you will see in today's video how I have been the sacrificial lamb, the martyr, the scapegoat, and the collateral damage in my family at all costs, as long as the public persona and the public reputation remain flawless, pristine, unfazed. As I said, my mother is very successful, well-educated, very talented woman, has an excellent, well-earned public reputation that she has deliberately and intentionally created throughout her whole life, and her reputation is pristine. One Mother's Day, before I went no contact, my brother took my mother and me, my partner at the time, and my brother's wife to Mother's Day brunch at the Four Seasons. My mother just said this very happenstancely, just like saying today is Mother's Day. She said, you know what? This is the first year I don't know anyone personally on city council. Now, I didn't even clock that. Like, to me, that was just like a normal thing that she would say because it was just true. And my sister-in-law said, you know what? Most people can't just call up people on city council. That's not most people's reality. So that just speaks to kind of my mom's connections and relationships. There's just one example, one sliver of her connections and the way she thinks about things. But her public reputation and private life were two totally different things. The house that I grew up in, behind closed doors, I experienced sibling abuse at the hands of a mentally ill sibling. And for decades, when I asked my mother for help, protection, or to intervene, her mantra was always, I'm not in this. This is sibling rivalry. You two figure it out yourselves. That was her 3-sentence mantra. Anytime my sibling would be screaming, yelling, throwing things, becoming the actual Tasmanian devil in our house, I would go to her in her room when she would be lying on her bed, asking for help, asking for protection, asking for refuge. And she would say, I'm not in this. This is sibling rivalry. You two figure it out yourselves. Meanwhile, I'm being harmed. I'm being abused. And that is what she said. No protection, no refuge, no safety. When she said that, I knew that this wasn't sibling rivalry, but her refusal to intervene, her refusal to help me, her refusal was my norm. So I was just out there fending for myself, even though I was a child and I was asking for help and asking for protection, and she refused. And that was the bulk of my childhood with my sibling. It was just chaos. It was unbridled rage. It was unpredictable. It was a very scary, painful, toxic, traumatizing environment to be raised in. And then to not be protected and to be dismissed amplified the feeling. Meanwhile, as soon as we crossed the threshold of our house and went into the outside world, everything looked great. Perfect, polished, pristine, and put together from the outside looking in. We were the Cosbys, a big fancy house with a lake view and gorgeous collectible art. Some of my friends call my mother's house the Essence House. Private middle school, high school, and college educations that she completely paid for out of pocket. I had braces, which she never ceased to remind me cost $6,000, although she was the one who wanted me to have them. Braces weren't even on my mind, weren't even on my radar, but that was something that was important to her, that I had these perfect teeth. She paid for Spelman out of pocket, and then with a smile and laughter would remind me and anyone else who would listen that her daughter and all of her money went to Spelman. And going to college wasn't even my idea. I wanted to be out and about traipsing and traveling in the world, bipping and bopping. But that was what made her look good. After college, my mom bought me and my sibling a house in Atlanta. And while all of this is generous and looks incredibly great on paper, and I appreciate every single thing that she's done for me, it is complicated because it was always with strings attached. None of this was freely given. The undertow message was, I've done all this for you, you owe me, and I own you. And so as soon as there was any criticism, as soon as there was pushback, which I will show you my receipts documenting, even from things that you might consider small to things as large as me literally dying and her not caring, which I will show you all the receipts for. There were always hidden strings attached. Sometimes they were articulated, and most of the times they were not. It was just expected that I fall in line and take on my role as the caretaker, the martyr, the collateral damage, the scapegoat. As long as everyone in my family was taken care of, I was emotionally on my own. Financially and logistically, everything else was present and in place. Structurally, everything else was present and in place. But emotionally, absent parent. I understand why a lot of people whose parents were absent physically might say, but she paid for this, she did that, she offered that. You had all of this access, you had all of these luxuries, you had all of these things, which is true. And again, I'm grateful. I would not be who I am today without any of those things. And there was negligence. This is why I say I experienced narcissistic neglect. And although neglect is a form of abuse, I don't say narcissistic abuse straight out, because it has all of these other connotations. But narcissistic neglect is the story that I'm telling you today. As many of us who are the oldest daughter and or raised by emotionally neglectful people and or emotionally unavailable, we're parentified very young. My mother used to tell this story as a bragging right. I was about 4 years old one day when she was tired and exhausted and on the bed. And I went over and I said, "You rest, mommy. I'll take care of you. You rest." And instead of saying, "No, I got this. You're a kid. You go play, you go read, you go enjoy yourself," she said, "Yes." She's like, "Okay," and pretended to let me take care of her and let her rest. And she used to tell this story as a bragging to show how mature I was, or to show how responsible I was, or tuned in, or affectionate, whatever. When I was about 25, I had to tell her to stop telling that story. It is not a bragging rights story. I had no business at 4 years old caretaking my mother, who was 36, or even pretending to, or even being rewarded or validated or approved of, or given this kind of appreciation for caretaking her. I don't know where I got that idea that was my job to do, but what I do know is that it was affirmed, and that she thought it up until 20 something years later. She thought that it was a bragging right, that it was something to be proud of. And I had to tell her, as the adult who used to be that child, that is not something to be bragging about or to be proud of. I learned codependence. I learned caretaking. I learned enmeshment. I learned being rewarded for taking care of adults when they should be taking care of themselves. And that showed up in my romantic relationships for decades. I'm painting the picture for you of the cost and the obligations and the responsibilities and the sense of ownership that my mother had over me, even at 4 years old, to be her caretaker. And that has played out over and over and over again. And when I stopped fulfilling that role, when I retired, when I unplugged from that matrix, that is when the real repercussions came. When I no longer was playing that game, that is when the real repercussions happened. Because my mother, again, my mother's narcissism didn't come in the form of yelling, screaming, insults. She lectured. She didn't spank. She's a naturally very warm, affectionate, likable person. And she genuinely likes people. She's very complimentary and celebratory, authentically in a lot of ways. So even though a lot of narcissists are pretending to like people, she's genuine in those ways. She's genuinely cares about people and genuinely likes them. This is why it feels complicated, because there are parts of her that do show up genuine and warm and affectionate, but then there's always the undertow. There's always strings attached. There's always expectations, at least when it comes to me. The narcissistic neglect that I experienced with my mother was more hands-off than hands-on. And being hands-off, giving me more responsibility consistently for decades than a child should have ever had, was also abusive. And I can already hear her mantra echoing in my head right now as I'm telling you this story. I did the best I could with the tools I had in the shed. I did the best I could with the tools I had in the shed. That was her mantra. Anytime I asked for more, anytime there was a critique, anytime I said, save me, protect me, help me, anytime I said, this did not work for me, anytime I said, our family is dysfunctional, I'm doing the best I can with the tools I have in the shed, which was actually a way for her to end the conversation, shut it down without taking on any accountability or any responsibility or any commitment to actually change anything. And while it may be true that she was doing her best at the time with the tools that she had in the shed, who am I to say? I don't know. I'm not in her head. I can't tell what she's doing the best or she's not doing the best, because I don't radically believe that everyone on the planet is doing the best they can at all times. I think people are doing what they want to do. And then most of the time they're like, that's enough. I don't got to do no more. But my feeling now as an adult reflecting on it is get more tools. Even if you were doing the best that you could with the tools that you had in the shed. Even if that's true, if you know your child is being harmed and abused and asking you for help at the hands of their sibling, and you say, I'm doing the best I can with the tools I have in the shed, get more tools. Create safety, create protection. Make sure that both of your children are well and safe. I'm going to get to a story in just a little bit about how even when I deliberately, explicitly, and directly asked for that, she refused because she was centering herself instead. What I do know is that even if you're doing the best with the tools you have in the shed, sometimes your best is not good enough. And that's the facts. As a vulnerable and unprotected child, I still had the right to ask for and receive more. What I learned instead, when I got shut down, ignored, dismissed, mocked, and minimized, was that love hurts and it means self-sacrifice. That my job was to take care of my sibling, no matter what cost, no matter how I was being harmed. Even as a child, it was my job to be the martyr. It was my job to be the sacrificial lamb. It was my job to be the collateral damage. And the expectation was not for my sibling. The expectation was for me to make sure that I was doing what I was supposed to do as the older sibling and that I could just be the whipping boy. The message I internalized was that I was collateral damage because my sibling was more important. Our family's reputation was more important. The public facade was more important. As soon as we crossed that threshold, we were the Cosbys. We were polished up and perfect and cute and put together. It wasn't like my mom shoved things down our throat with what we were supposed to say or what we weren't supposed to say. But what I do know is we weren't supposed to tell what was actually happening behind the scenes. I wasn't supposed to acknowledge nothing about what was really going on behind closed doors. Sunday was the day that it was the most intense. I have so many memories of Sunday mornings getting ready to go to Sunday school and church because we were avid and regular members at church my entire life. And we had to leave, obviously, at a certain time to get to church and get to Sunday school at a certain time. There was so much screaming, so much chaos, so much rage, so much unrest. And I'm sitting here trying to get dressed and do all the things as well, but it was pure mayhem, pure chaos. I was even in the car sometimes. This is why I don't like being in a car with people screaming, yelling, talking loud. It is so triggering for me. So even in a car, that volume would be still yelling, screaming, just mayhem. But as soon as we got out of that car and crossed that threshold into First Day in Me Church, it was whoop, back into on for the world, on for the public. The facade is back on. And I hated it. I hated it. It felt so disingenuous. It felt so performative. It felt so fake because there was no resolution. There was no process. There wasn't even an acknowledgement of the trauma. It was just poop back into the world, smiling and shaking hands and kissing babies. The gaslighting was thick and it was deep. For years, my mother denied, ignored, and minimized the harm that was going on in the family. It was winter in Seattle. I remember because it was dark when she dropped me off at the bus stop in the morning. And I had written a note because I had just had one night too many of screaming and yelling and chaos and just trauma after trauma. It was just terrible. This is very early 90s. Having these kinds of conversations on television was just starting to happen. And I heard the word dysfunctional. And I was like, that sounds like my family. I was probably in the 6th grade. And I remember courageously, bravely writing my mother a note, this family is dysfunctional. You've had me parentified since I'm 4 years old, 3 years old. So I'm telling you the truth. And for me, the truth is neutral. Even as far back as 6th grade, even probably before then, I wasn't saying that as a judgment, even though I'm sure that's how she heard it. It was neutral. This family is dysfunctional. This is a cry for help. I need help. I gave her the note as I was getting out of the car. She's dropping me off at the bus stop in hopes that things would change. And when I saw her after school and wanted to talk to her, she mocked me. She thought it was funny that I called our family dysfunctional. She thought it was funny that I used that word. There was no addressing the dysfunction. There was no even recognizing of the dysfunction. She would tell that as a joke at parties. You know what that girl said? That our family is dysfunctional. Not addressing it. And as you'll see in the receipts that I'll show you in just a little bit, that kind of dismissing, that kind of minimizing is still present in how she addresses me and addresses any kind of conflict, any kind of acknowledgement of the trauma still it just minimizes and dismissing. And yet years later, when she and I were in therapy together, because again, the cage is large. And by that, I mean, she's going to show up to therapy. She has a master's in spiritual psychology. She's going to show up at therapy. She's going to show up at the retreats. She's going to show up for the deep dive community conversations. Not only is she going to show up for them, she's going to lead them. Not only is she going to lead them, she's going to be well paid and highly respected for facilitating them in private and public sector, in the government, conflict resolution, communication, all of these things. She was DEI before DEI was even a thing. Before that was called DEI. She's been doing that kind of work for over 40, 45 years. So she ain't new to this. She's true to this, to the public life, to the public persona. But again, as soon as we cross the threshold into the house, I'm not in this. This is sibling rivalry. You two figure it out yourselves. It's all theory for other people, not for her home. So she gonna show up to therapy. So she and I were in therapy. I was about mid-20s. But is anything actually going to change? Is there any actual accountability? You can guess. I'd been going to see the therapist individually already, and she had done a community workshop about boundaries. That was actually her specialty, was boundaries. So my mother, my sibling, and I went to this workshop. I invited them to come because I was like, oh, we need some help. I was still really invested in helping our family heal and become healthy. And there's this thing in psychology or therapy called the drama triangle, where there's the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. And the three of us were playing out this role because you had to break into triads. If you were there solo, you would find a stranger. But because we came together, right? We were the triad. And that's when I realized, oh, my sister's the victim, I'm the persecutor, and my mother is the rescuer. Oh, that's how this dynamic is going. Because we were asked to just role play. That's when I had the light bulb. When I tell you my sibling stormed out of that workshop, drove away, and left, never to come back again, never to revisit the conversation again, left in the middle of the drama triangle. They decided they did not want to participate, stormed out, and never came back. But my mother and I went into therapy together, the two of us, because she was like, I really want to work this out. I really want to, get a healthy relationship with the two of us, which great, I'm down. In our sessions with the therapist said everything that I had already been saying for years, everything, reflected and recounted everything I had already been telling my mother for years. And she seemed to finally be able to hear it from the therapist. And finally, she blurted out, don't you think there were times I wanted to put chloroform over your sibling's mouth just so they would calm down and be quiet?
I'm shocked, honestly.
This was the first time there has been any acknowledgement, any recognition, any notice of the harm that had been caused or the chaos in the household. Because again, her mantra was, this is sibling rivalry. I'm not in this. You two figure it out yourselves. So no, I didn't know that you had thought about putting chloroform on a piece of fabric and putting it over my sibling's mouth, when for decades you said it was just sibling rivalry and leaving it up to me to figure it out for myself because you weren't in this. Why would I think that you even thought anything was wrong until you admitted decades later that you had wanted to put chloroform on my sibling's mouth so that you could get some peace and quiet? And I held on to that like a gold nugget for 12, 13 years. I was like, okay, she gets it. Maybe she's not going to change, but she gets it because she finally had actually admitted that something was not okay. But 13 years after that, I was living in Mexico. I remember this clear as day. I was brushing my teeth in the morning in the bathroom, and it popped into my head like out of nowhere. I wasn't thinking about my mom. I wasn't thinking about my sibling. I was just brushing my teeth, living in Mexico. I remember what the light looked like, and it popped into my head. That had nothing to do with me. That acknowledgement, don't you think I wanted to put chloroform on a piece of cloth and put it over their mouth, had nothing to do with me. It wasn't compassion for me. There wasn't still no acknowledgement for me about the abuse that I, as a child, had experienced for decades. There was no sympathy. There was no empathy. It had nothing to do with me. It was my mother centering herself and what she would have done because of her own discomfort. I was a non-factor, but not just by my mother. This message that I was a non-factor, I was just there as a scapegoat, reverberated in so many different ways throughout many of the family relationships in my childhood and young adulthood. I was just seen as collateral damage. During the times that my mother couldn't handle my sibling, she would send my sibling away for weeks at a time. I grew up in this community, not a physical community, but Black families in Seattle that we called the Village, right? Like we were like a biological family, but we weren't actually biologically related. And so there was another family in the Village that had a 2-parent household, which was very structured, very disciplined. The thing that made the Village is everybody was Black, but almost everybody was from the South. My mother's from Texas. This family, the dad's from Texas and the mom was from Mississippi, right? So they had a very structured and much more disciplined house than my mother had. And for those weeks that my sibling went to go live with them, so to give my mother a break, I could finally breathe. There was finally peace in the house. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't crazy. I could just have a normal life in my home, not looking around the corner, trying to anticipate when a rage outburst might be, or being so caught off guard because it was so unpredictable that I didn't know when was coming or what would trigger it or how long it would last. It was absolute hell. So when my sibling went away, I could finally have some breathing room and breathe, because when my sibling wasn't in a rage explosion and a rage fit, things were fine. It was fine. It's the trauma of not only the rage fit, but not knowing when it's coming and not knowing how long it's going to last. That was really hard. So 30 years later, I was talking to the mother of the home that my sibling would go to for weeks at a time about what it was like growing up as a child in that household, why it was so stressful, why it was so chaotic, why I have no contact with my mother. And what I pointed out to this person was that I was a child and my mother couldn't handle my sibling, and my mother was an adult, not even a young mother. My mother had me when she was 32. And I'm the oldest. So she was an adult. And I asked the mother of the house where my sibling would go, did y'all think about how that impacted me being the child? When my mother couldn't have my sibling, how did you think I handled it? And she said, we never thought about you. You know what? We never thought about you. We never thought about how that impacted you. You always seemed to have it together. And that spoke volumes. I told her then, I'm telling you now, I had it together because I had to have it together. I was a child, the eldest daughter, and no one was checking for me. I said, well, do you remember anything about what I had going on? And she said, you always seem to be looking for a ride, which is true, because could take the bus. I was fluent in the bus. I could take the bus to the location. But if my mother was doing other things or busy with work or busy with whatever she was doing, I was going to need to get a ride home, because now it's dark. Now I need to get home. I need to go do the next things. This is also how I learned to assert myself and ask for what I needed, because yes, I'm resourceful, but I was also a child. And Seattle gets dark in the winter at 4 o'clock. I had no business being outside as a child looking for a ride, trying to figure out my way home. But I was resourceful, and thankfully I was in community with people who could figure out how to get me home, because a lot of us lived in the same neighborhood. But that is what she remembered. You always seemed to have it together, and you were always looking for a ride, and we didn't think about you. I wasn't afraid to say the things that needed to be said. I was always the one saying the emperor has no clothes. This house is dysfunctional. This don't seem right. Part of that looked like begging my mother to institutionalize my sibling. I begged her, but she refused because my mother hadn't been raised by her mother, which is a story for a different time, but she was raised by her grandparents. When I would ask her, please institutionalize my sibling, at least please put her somewhere residential, right? Those weeks that she went away was a good taste of a calm life. I was like, please send them away. And the response was, no, they don't need the help. Or, no, I think everything's going great. Or, no, I think we're going to figure this out. No, that was never the justification or the rationale. The rationale was, no, because I wasn't raised by my mother. I would not dare, I cannot imagine sending my child away. So again, centering herself. Again, this is why it's the long, y'all don't know. People didn't know what was happening behind closed doors. So they had no idea what I was experiencing, how I was advocating for myself again and again and again, and being shut down, minimized, dismissed again and again and again. It would be different. I think it would even have a different flavor or a different tone if I was being minimized or dismissed and being like, well, you're making a big deal out of nothing because it's not that big of a deal. That's not what was happening. In this case, it was no, because I couldn't dare do it for my own needs. So in saying that, my mother prioritized her unhealed trauma of not being raised by her mother over my safety and my siblings' mental health needs. We both had needs that were not being met in order to center my mother's unhealed trauma. The only person who actually validated my experience as a child was my childhood best friend. We had gone to church together, but we didn't really know each other. But in the 5th grade, we were the 2 Black girls at a very bougie elite prep school in Seattle. And we were the 2 Black girls. So we became best friends and ended up going through middle school together. We were best friends in high school. And then we both actually went to Spelman as well and stayed friends through college and her grad school. We're no longer friends, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but she's the first and only person during that time who was like, oh no, something ain't right. Something ain't right. She is the only person who witnessed and affirmed my reality. The only one, because she had the benefit of the outside world, right? I said school together, church together. She saw all the public coming and goings and sleepovers, and she would be at my house for weeks sometimes. Like we would just be together all the time. She was the one person who saw the full trajectory of my reality and affirmed that I was not crazy. I was not exaggerating. I was not making it up, because she saw it in real time. After a certain point, the mask dropped. She was no longer a guest. She was just family, and we had been friends for that long. For most of my life, I was angry at my sibling. I was so angry because I'm like, you were violent, you abused me, you harmed me. I was angry. I thought they were the problem, and they were in a lot of ways. But it wasn't until I would say maybe 2019, 2020 that I was driving on a freeway in Seattle. I remember exactly where I was. And I realized it hit me again, like a light bulb came on.
This is an aha moment.
My mother's neglect, not my siblings' behavior, was the root issue, because my mother was the adult. We were not peers. We were not all on the same level. My mother was actually in charge, but my siblings' rage ran the household, despite my mother being in charge. So that occurred to me. I was like, oh, my mom's, I'm not in this. This is sibling rivalry. You two figured out yourselves. Her absolving herself of any accountability and any responsibility and any actual resolution, putting it back on me, essentially, to try and resolve or keep the peace or find refuge, meant that in my mind, because I was vulnerable to the harm alone, that I blamed the person who harmed me. It took me decades to realize, oh no, the person who should have been protecting me wasn't, and did not care, and absolved herself of any accountability and any responsibility. So yes, my siblings' behavior was terrible and a trauma and a problem and abusive, but the actual person responsible is the person who was responsible for the house, which was my mother. I am no contact with my mother, and I stopped talking to my sibling before I went no contact with my mother. because I didn't think I needed to go no contact with my mother. As I mentioned, I was like, the sibling is the problem. That is I'm going to address. So my last straw was I was about mid-30s. I received a 5-minute phone voice message of my sibling screaming at me. I had done something that they didn't like, and they were screaming at me at the top of their lungs for 5 minutes.
No, like that's too much.
And I realized, I remember again exactly where I was on this day. I remember where I was working and what desk I was sitting at, listening to this voicemail. You know, I'm old. That's how I do phone. And I said, oh, never again. Never again. When I was a child, I was powerless. I had no agency. I could not put up boundaries. We were in a meshed family unit. I could not separate myself. But I'm big grown. I'm an adult, and no one screams at me. No one gets to scream at me. I don't give a shit who you are. I blocked my sibling and have never spoken to them since that day, because I was like, oh, you abused me for decades. I'm opting out. I'm retired. So I told my mother, and my mother said, I understand. I understand. I told one of the aunts in the village, and her first thing was so heartbroken, so sad. Not the same aunt who my sibling had gone to their house, a different aunt. And I'm so heartbroken. I'm so sad. And I'm like, y'all jokers witnessed this abuse and trauma for decades. And what did you expect me to do? Just stay and be the collateral damage, be the martyr, be the sacrificial lamb, and not have any boundaries? I don't know how you live your life, aunties and uncle. I don't know how y'all live your lives, but for me and mine, I don't have to do that anymore. So my mom said she understood. So me and my mom are still in a relationship together. We're still doing our thing. I actually really love my mom. She's a dope human, and I'll get to more of that later. She's dope. I enjoy spending our time together. We have a good time together, but all the rest of this is why my relationship with her is not safe and why I don't have a relationship. So my birthday's in May. Shout out Taurus Nation. And my birthday came and went. I didn't get a message from my sibling about my birthday, which was fine because I blocked them, right? I wasn't sweating it. I wasn't tripping. But my sibling's birthday is 6 weeks after mine in June. And I got a text message that said, reminder, your sibling's birthday is today. And I was like trying to understand what's happening. My sibling's birthday has been the same that their entire lives. That ain't new, right? I'm crystal clear when their birthday is. But I already told you that I'm not talking to them, and I told you why, and you said you understood. So to circle the block and try to get me to talk to my sibling again, despite me putting up my boundaries, I realized, oh, she don't care. She don't care. She don't care if it's safe for me. She don't care if I'm gonna be harmed. She don't care. That's what I'm not in this. This is sibling rivalry. You two figure it out yourself. If we don't get to the nuts and the bolts of it, she isn't safe because she don't care. And at this point, I'm an adult, so I don't need her to protect me, but I'm going to protect myself, right? Let's flash back a little bit earlier. A few years prior, I was in a relationship for 3.5 years, right? I was in a relationship with a very cute, charming person who I thought was a great person. Turns out they weren't. But before I realized that they weren't, I was reading a Cosmopolitan article about like, is so-and-so a narcissist? Do they have narcissistic traits? Like a quiz, right? Like a little pop quiz. Like, oh, okay, let me check this. And as I was doing it, because to me, narcissism could have been like orangutan. It could have been like banana. It had no emotional charge for me. So I was like looking at it and I was like, this seems like not only my partner, but this also reminds me of my mom. Like they both seem narcissistic. This, according to this Cosmo quiz, right? According to this test, they both seem narcissistic. And I remember telling my partner at the time, like, isn't this funny? You and my mom have similar characteristics. And they're like, oh, okay. So for me, it wasn't even a big deal. But I remember that was the first time that it was even a seed in my mind. Fast forward, I find out that this person is a psychopathic narcissist. And the 3.5 years of our relationship, they were a complete figment of their own imagination. Everything about them was a lie. Everything I thought I knew was true. They were supposed to have been sober. They were an active addict and also selling drugs and also sleeping with their drug dealer. I could go on and on and on and on. Oh, that's a whole separate video for another time. You let me know if you want me to talk about that. I found out that I was living a lie with someone who did not exist, even though we were cohabitating like 3.5 years with a figment of their own imagination, which completely gutted me, devastated me. My whole reality was distorted when I realized, oh, I've been living a lie. And I'm a very literal, honest, straight up and down person. I don't make stuff up. I don't exaggerate. I'm not hyperbolic, which is going to come and circle back in a little bit when I tell you the most diabolical thing my mother did, which really put the nail in the coffin that she don't care about me at all, for real, for real, for real, despite how she is pretending and performing for the public. That is going to come into play in just a little bit, because when I tell you I'm honest to a fault, it's what I think most people do not like about me, is that I don't lie. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So in the wake of all this, right, finding out that I had been in a completely false relationship for 3.5 years with someone who did not exist, my mother and I went to Mexico. She took me to Mexico to recover and heal. At this point, this is very fresh. Like, this is maybe 2 weeks after all of this hit the fan. My ex is calling my aunt to talk to my mom because they know that I'm not talking to them in Mexico, calling all this, trying to chase me down, all this stuff, right? And I'm grieving. I've invested 3.5 years with someone I thought I was going to be with for the long haul. We've only been there maybe a week or so. And I'm just mourning. And the thing is, my mom knows all the ups and downs, ins and outs, nooks and crannies. This ex actually lived with my mom for the last year of our relationship, based on a complete and total fabrication and lie, of course. But my mom knew everything. My mom knew that this ex was secretly storing drugs in her car, selling drugs out of her house. Like, this degree of diabolical when they were supposed to be sober, right? So I'm like reeling. I ain't never seen none of what they were doing. I didn't see it. I don't know it before, during, or after, right? So I am reeling. And my mother says, are we still talking about them? Are we still talking about this? And I was like,
what in the entire heck has just happened?
Yeah. But I didn't have the emotional capacity to like defend myself, right? And you know why we're talking about this. Of course she knew why we were talking about this. She had the whole firsthand experience. She knew more than anybody else what we were experiencing, but it had encroached upon her being the center. And so this was no longer the topic of conversation. She could say, again, this is why it's so subtle and nuanced. I paid for you to come to Mexico. We are living in this great place. Da, 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 da. Why are we still talking about this, right? It's the money. It's the undercurrent, right? As long as she can say, I paid for her to go to this, I don't know why she's still talking about. The mantra during my whole life was that I was going to be responsible for taking care of my mother when she was older. That's what she kept pushing upon me. You know, you're going to take care of me when I'm older. You know, you're going to take care of me when I'm older. And I'm like, I'm 13. I'm 15. I don't even know where I'm going to be, what I'm going to do, who I'm going to be when I'm older. Why are you giving me this responsibility to take care of you when I'm older, right? But that was what she kept saying. So when I was 16 years old, my mother was dating this nice man. She gets engaged to marry this man. My sibling and I were not on board. We even sat him down and had a conversation with him in the kitchen. We had decided we needed to tell him the tea, right? Because he only knew the outside persona. He only knew the facade. And my sibling and I, being the honest people that we are, wanted to sit him down and tell him the truth, right? We were like, you have no idea what you're getting into. You have no idea what actually happens on the other side. We warned him. And he thought we were trying to run interference. He thought we were trying to dissuade him from marrying our mother. And we were like, no, no, no. We just want you to be prepared because it's chaos and mayhem here. He dismissed us. But there was a point in that process when I didn't want her mom to get married. Before that, before I really started to get to know my soon-to-be stepfather, I was like, I don't want you to get married. I don't want you to get married, right? And my mom said, well, if you don't want me to get married, that means you're really going to be taking care of me when I'm older. And I was like, have at it. Immediately, have at it. I don't want none of that. Have at it, right? Fast forward, decades later, they end up not staying together. They go their separate ways long before it's publicly known. They show up at weddings and events as if they're married. They ain't together. Nobody's the wiser because they are putting on this Black bourgeois, Black excellence performance persona. Meanwhile, I had already told her, she's like, you don't want me to get married? You're going to be taking care of me? I say, go for it. I don't want to take care of you, get married. But when they went their separate ways, she tried to re-enroll me in this. Okay, now that we're not together anymore, you know that you're going to have to take care of me. I was like, oh no takey backsies. I gave that up. Going back to, this is about her. This is why it's the long game. It's the long story. It's not an immediate gratification. It's not immediate revenge. It's the long game. The public persona and everything on the outside. So 2022, I was living in Kigali, Rwanda. I'd been there for almost a year. I did make a video about my life and my experience living in Rwanda. So I will link it right here. I'll also put the link in the description so that you can watch it. Not right now, don't click off, but watch it when you're done. This story is the pinnacle of when I realized my mother don't care about me. She cares about the public reputation. Have you commented? Have you subscribed? Have you liked yet? I'll wait. Okay, thank you. I had a medical and financial crisis. I was in the hospital multiple times in Kigali, and I knew I needed to have major surgery, and I just wasn't going to be able to do that and recover in Rwanda. My money had trickled to a very slow drizzle, and so I did not have the money or the resources to leave and to get back to the States. I was still in touch with my stepsister and my stepfather, and they contacted my mother, and I contacted my mother. Now, my mother, because for her, again, it's all about the drama, contacted the American Embassy in Rwanda twice looking for me. Even though I had called her, she wanted to ring the alarm, I'm sure, so she could tell the story. I called the embassy, I was looking for her, and she wanted me to come back to Seattle to get medical care. And I did not want to. The doctor I had been working with remotely was in California. I did not want to come back to Seattle, also because it was winter. It's not good for my mental health. I did not have support. I knew what I needed, and I did not want to come back to Seattle. She said that that was the only way that she was going to help me, was with strings attached if I came back to Seattle. This is in November of 2022. She said, no, and I'm literally dying. I'm literally having a medical crisis. I'm literally having a health emergency. She says, if you don't come back, if you don't do it on my terms, if you don't do it the way I want you to do it, I'm not helping you with anything. Now, I didn't want to come back to Seattle. My stepfather said that he would be willing to pay for my plane ticket back to the States, but he made it seem like it was the most horrible, obligatory, heavy lifting obligation thing he did not want to do. Like I was pulling his teeth, pulling out his chin hairs one by one. And so I said, I'm going to start a GoFundMe. My stepsister and I talked about it. And I was like, I think this is the best idea. Did I want to start a GoFundMe? No. Begging people for money on the internet was not on my bingo card. And I hope it is never on my bingo card again in my whole entire life. I'm very grateful for every single penny, every single person who donated. I ended up raising over $33,000. And someone who I met only twice in person ended up buying my plane ticket back. She just contacted me on Instagram and was like, what do we need to do to get you back to the States? Thank God, right? Thank God for people who are generous without strings attached. Thank God. I'm so grateful because I had to figure out how I was going to get out of Africa, East Africa, back to the States for medical care, get surgery, survive, live, because I was literally dying. I could not even walk up my stairs. I'm not trying to figure out all these family dynamics of politics. So someone I had met twice in person messaged me, what do we need to do to get you back to the States? Okay, I'm going to take another gig. I'm going to pay for your plane ticket. Solicited. All she saw was my GoFundMe. Posted my GoFundMe, raised $33,000. She helped me get back to the States. I rented a gorgeous, beautiful house in Los Angeles, a block and a half from where I spent every summer growing up with my grandmother. I was very grateful for the GoFundMe. It did have other impacts because I think begging anybody for money on the internet is going to mess up your brand and your public reputation. At least it did mine. But I did what I had to do to stay alive. I get back to the States. I'm going to the doctor 3 to 5 times a week. I had to get blood transfusions, iron infusions.
Friends, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, or at this point, like 4:20 in the morning. I'm sitting in front of the hospital, getting ready to go into the ER, hopefully for the emergency blood transfusion. I have so many thoughts, but I'm just trying to stay focused and aligned and feeling good and anticipating that this is going to go well and that it's going to be easy and that I'm going to feel better and that my body is going to start shifting and feeling better after I get healthier blood into my body. So please keep me in your high thoughts and prayers for all of that. And I'm here alone, which is the most challenging part of it because going through health challenges physically is challenging enough, but to navigate the lack of insurance and all of the medical care systems or lack thereof care or whatever is a lot. So please just keep me in your high thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
I had to get all kinds of tests from all kinds of doctors to figure out what was actually wrong, what was actually going on with me. It was a lot of work. It was physically exhausting. It was mentally exhausting. It was emotionally exhausting. It was financially exhausting. It was all of the things. And by February, I was still fundraising, but I was like, let me just ask my mom for direct help for my GoFundMe, because she and my stepfather were the first, and my stepsister, of course, but she knew the whole thing the whole time, were the first two people before I had a GoFundMe. They already knew what was going on. They already knew. That's why I went to them first, because they're my family. They were my parental units. But they had not contributed. They had not donated. They had not even checked to see how I was doing. They knew something was wrong, but they had not even checked to see how I was doing. So by February, I sent my mother an email, which I will share here, with the subject, I need your help. February 16th, 2023, I sent this email to my mother with the subject line, I need your help. Hi, Mom. As you know, because she knew, because we had had an exchange when I was living in Rwanda and trying to get back to the United States. As you know, I'm currently living in LA receiving urgent medical attention. In October, I started a medical emergency GoFundMe so that I could return to the US from Rwanda and pay for housing, transportation, and medical care, especially since I don't have US health insurance while living abroad. Now, in order to continue receiving the medical care I desperately need, I'm asking if you can donate. And I've redacted the number here because I don't want to send anyone up in a tizzy. The number is not the point of the email because she did not donate any number. I'm asking if you can donate, which will go towards surgery, the medical specialists I see on a weekly basis, as well as my immediate housing and transportation needs. Donation can be made via PayPal, redacted, of course. Thank you for your help. In this very time-sensitive, urgent matter, I deeply appreciate your contribution and generosity from the bottom of my heart. Love with my name. Also, if you could share my medical emergency GoFundMe on your Facebook and with your friends, it would be incredibly helpful. Thank you again. Now, in reading this in retrospect, I can see how that might seem like a scammer or a bot. It's very sterile. There's no emotion in this email. There's no warmth. But this was me because I was gray rocking my mother. If you're not familiar with that phrase, it's where you're not giving any emotional output. You're not giving any emotional energy. It's just the very basic nuts and bolts. So now in reading this, I can see how this might seem to be a scammer. But what happened afterwards, obviously, I was not a scammer. This was actually me. Now, I had gone no contact. I had not talked to her, but I was still under the delusion that if I was dying, which I was, if my health was in a crisis, which it was, that she would help. The examples I've shown you up to this date give me no evidence for reasons to believe that. Her, I'm not in this, you figure it out yourself, still applied. I didn't know it at the time because I was like desperate. This is serious. And the first response to my request was, is this my daughter who I haven't heard from in 3 months? How do I know you're not a scammer? Call me to prove that you are who you say you are. Her response message was, not sure this is from my name, since I have not heard from you in 3 years. I'll need you to call me to confirm that this request is from you and not a scam. I am in South Africa and it is past my bedtime as I have an early morning tomorrow. Don't call tonight as I have to get in bed ASAP. Now, maybe she thought I was a scammer. So let's just give her the benefit of the doubt. Just notice that there's nothing about my health and my emergencies, nothing. Just notice that. So I followed suit. I called her. Reading this in retrospect, I realized that she didn't tell me when to call her. There was nothing about having a conversation or actually connecting to see if I was a scammer. It reads to me like a power play. I responded initially February 17th, 4:27 p.m. Yes, this is me and not a scam, as those are the proper links to my GoFundMe and PayPal. And these were the PayPal that I've been using for years. It was the email address that I was emailing her from at that time. I will call you in the South African morning per your request. I called her and she didn't answer. So I sent another message. I just called your cell phone twice, but there was no answer and your voicemail didn't pick up. Again, all under the guise of proving to her that I was not a scammer.
We thought that was settled.
Her response was, we were out on the road all day, leaving early tomorrow for the airport. We'll have to connect in Cape Town. mom. So by now I'm seeing that knows that I'm not a scammer. She signs it mom. So she knows it's me and is still trying to get me to call her, which at this point I'm willing to do because desperate means call for desperate measures. Again, notice no time, no commitment to talk. Just we will have to connect in Cape Town. I called her. No answer. Meanwhile, she's messaging me under the guise of proving that I am who I say I am, that I'm not a scammer. Fine. I'm not a scammer. Okay, great. Again, I'm a very literal person. And now I know better, but I'm like, maybe she thinks I'm actually a scammer. So I'm going to call her voicemail at her home in Seattle. I know she's in South Africa, but I'm going to call her voicemail at home in Seattle to prove that I'm not a scammer, because why would a scammer have her home phone number? And she'll hear my voice and she'll hear me say, I'm not a scammer. So I left her voicemail at her home number because I know she can check it from anywhere in the world. Keep being resourceful, right? And I'm like, it's me. I still need help. I haven't talked to you, but I'm probably not as cheery as this, but I'm like, I'm just proving to you that I'm not a scammer because that was your requirement. I then send her this email. Hi, Mom. I understand that due to time differences and availability, we may not be able to talk on the phone in a timely manner. Now that you've confirmed that this is me and not spam, please consider donating, redacted amount, towards my medical expenses per my initial email. As of right now, without immediate financial support, I will be unable to stay in my housing, have transportation to from doctor's appointments, pay for specialists, receive surgery, aftercare, or have the funds for medication. If you're willing to donate, please consider donating directly via PayPal with my email that's attached to my PayPal, which is the same email that I was writing her from, so that all of the funds go directly to me without GoFundMe withholding a fee. Also, it would be incredibly helpful if you'd be willing to share my medical emergency GoFundMe on your Facebook with your friends with the link to the GoFundMe. Thank you again. And then she responded with an email saying no, she would not do any of these things, even though she could have just said that initially. Her response was, and to be told that you are saying on Facebook that you, quote, have no family support, parentheses, which, by the way, is the reason my friends contacted me thinking that Facebook was not real since they know better, is more hurtful than you can imagine. So no, I'm not willing to share your medical emergency GoFundMe on Facebook and with my friends. The hurtful part was me naming the truth that I don't have a family support system. Because as I've said before, she still didn't offer any support. She still did not support me. The hurtful part was that I was telling the truth and not playing into the illusion. They know better because they know the illusion. They obviously didn't know the reality since I did not have a family support system and was not receiving any family support. Circling it all the way back to her. Still no question about how I was doing. Still no question of my health. Still no question of what I needed. No, it was centering her as the victim, centering me as wrong, bad, rogue. And meanwhile, I'm sick, I'm broke, I'm about to have surgery. And that whole prove to me that you're not a scammer was a lie. It was just a manipulation tactic to get me trying to chase her as she's bipping and bopping all around South Africa. It had nothing to do with my well-being, my health, or my care. She didn't care if I lived or died. She didn't care. And I want to be crystal clear. It's not that she didn't have the financial resources. She has money. She has plenty of money. And I'm not saying I'm entitled to it. I'm not saying I'm entitled to a penny.
No!
But I am saying, if when I sent that initial email and I said, I need your help, I'm having surgery, these are the things that are happening, instead of saying, prove to me you're not a scammer and having me chase her around South Africa, calling her, she could have just said, no, I haven't talked to you. I'm not going to donate. But instead, she's playing mind games and trying to manipulate me into following her around or doing her will. I think she was trying to punish me for not talking to her, for not doing things the way she wanted. And instead, she could have just said no. At this time, I could not function. I did not have a lot of energy and I'm in a financial crisis still because I'm like, I'm about to have surgery. I need to be able to pay my rent. I need to get some financial stability. Again, I'm not saying she owes me anything. I'm not saying she should have given me money. I'm saying she could have told me at the very first email instead of having me chase her around that no, she's not going to donate to my GoFundMe. which is what I asked in the first email. No, she's not going to send me any money. And no, she's not going to share my GoFundMe. And when people ask her about me, she tells them not to believe me because they know better, which all of this deliberately undermined my credibility. As I said, I've always been rogue. I've always been the one, the emperor has no clothes. I've always been someone who's done my own thing and lived my own life, marched to the beat of my own drum. And as I've established, my mother has a stellar public reputation. She could have posted that GoFundMe one time, and said, my daughter needs help. She's having a medical crisis. Let's help get her back from Africa. She was holding that, dangling that as a carrot above my head because I hadn't done things her way and I hadn't talked to her, which is fair. Again, I'm not saying she owes me anything, but she could have just said that. But she didn't want to because whether I lived or died was inconsequential. She refused to help. She didn't donate or share my GoFundMe. She told others, don't believe her because you know better. When I said I don't have a family support system.
On December 29th, 2022, I posted this to Facebook. 10 years ago, I had brain surgery and learned how to walk again. Recovery was grueling and took much longer than anticipated, but with continual family and community support, over time, I thankfully healed and fully recovered. A decade later, I'm having life-saving surgery again, but without the family support system or health insurance that got me through the first time. This is why I created the GoFundMe. This is why my business is on Front Street asking for help. This is why every donation counts. Thank you to everyone who has donated and continues to share the GoFundMe. Your support and contribution truly make the world of difference, and I couldn't be doing this without you. Thank you for standing in the gap so that I could receive the medical care urgently needed. You are truly lifesavers, and I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. This is in alignment with all of the other Facebook posts I made about not having a family support system. This was my language then, and it's my language now, which is to say, even if I had one mother who was super active and supportive and actually showed up for me in my darkest hour and time of need, that is not a support system. That would just be one person. I still do not have a family support system.
She told them not to believe that because, again, that public persona, and they know she's well financially resourced. She got money. So they're going to think, of course, she's taking care of things behind the scenes. Elle's always been rogue and done her own thing and always played to the beat of her own drum. Whereas my mother's always been consistent and has a great public figure and all that stuff. So they're going to take her word more than my word, especially when she's like, you know, she has a support system. But in the meantime, she wasn't supporting me. I asked for support and she didn't support me. I asked for money. She didn't donate. Asked her to share my GoFundMe. She refused. And then she told people not to believe me. So she sabotaged my public reputation even more because she told them not to believe me because I wasn't doing things her way. I said publicly, I don't have a family support system. And my mother, in the meantime, is posting old photos of the two of us on vacation in Paris or India. This is what was happening. It's subtle, it's subversive, and you would only know the truth if you know the truth behind closed doors, if you know the truth behind the scenes. That reality was, again, not the public persona and not the public reputation. Everything she created publicly showed that things were fine, connected. And even though she was so up in arms by me saying I don't have a family support system, she did nothing to support me, pretending like she did. She made me look dishonest while I was asking for help. And so when I tell you, as I gave you the example in the beginning about her knowing all the city council people, she could have said something and she didn't say anything. She could have just posted one time and my GoFundMe needs would have been met. But that would have made her look like a bad mother because people know she got money. People know she's financially resourced. She's bipping and bopping in South Africa and Kenya and Mexico and everywhere else. She's all over the world. And again, I'm not saying that she owes me anything, but just say that when I ask you via email. My role was to be the helpmate, the sacrificial lamb, the martyr, the collateral damage in service of everyone else. My role was not to have needs, not to have asks, not to have a crisis that wasn't going to make her look good. In this email, my mom talks about her being the ATM, and that's why I only need her when I need money. But she simultaneously says that she hasn't heard from me in years. So I'm not coming to you when I needed money because I needed money before then, but I'm not resourcing you. I thought that because it was literally life or death, that she would show up for me. And I learned the very clear lesson that that's not true. I had had tastes of that before, and in other ways that I haven't even mentioned here today, because this is a pattern, right? These are not one-off things. I had experienced this with her many times over the years, but when I knew it was literally life or death and she don't care and she's not going to show up and she's going to sabotage me and tell other people not to show up for me, I was like, oh, okay, we're really done. In the meantime, it was a very hard time emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically, financially. The only part of me that was well supported and well resourced was spiritually. I was fine spiritually, but the rest of it, not great. I was in a very hard place, and it had gotten really so bad that I had thought about ending it all multiple times, for better or worse. The main thing that prevented me from ending it all, because I was like, I just want to like go to sleep and never wake up. That was what I was feeling, was that I was subletting a really nice house that was like meticulously interior designed, beautiful, intentional, gorgeous house, very expensive things. And I was like, one, I don't want to ruin her home with anything, right? Like any way that I would choose to end it all. I don't want to ruin her home. And two, I don't want her to come home to a decomposing body. Like that's weird to me. In my darkest moments, in my darkest time, that is what kept me from ending it all. That's it. Truthfully, I was like, what else is going on? I'm sitting here begging people for money on the internet and I'm exhausted and I'm dying. Thankfully, I had two friends come help me. One came for surgery and was with me for a week.
Okay.
Can you wait?
Happy days.
Wait to the camera team.
Bye.
Bye.
See you when you wake up.
Okay. And the next came for the next week after. And I'm so grateful for them. The day before my surgery, I think I deleted this because by this time my mom's emails all went to spam. But I did see it because I check my spam every couple of weeks to make sure I'm not missing anything. Day before my surgery, and her email was accusing me of being a liar and telling me I needed to stop lying. And she knew when my surgery was because I told her, because again, I'm honest. I couldn't find it, so it must have gone to the cloud in the sky. But I was like, yeah, she don't have my back, right? Like I'm out here on my own. By the time I left Los Angeles, I was almost fully recovered from my surgery. I was still in a financial crisis, and I really had to start rebuilding my money from the bottom up, from the ground up. I had borrowed $500 from my stepsister. I had borrowed $1,000 from my childhood friend. I still owed the homeowner in Los Angeles for a month of rent. And I owed my subletter, who had been at my place in Seattle, I owed them their security deposit. I owed back rent in my Seattle apartment. I didn't have no money. I didn't know where any of this was coming from. I had put all of my money into staying alive and keeping my health going. I was starting literally financially from scratch. And when I came back to Seattle, I was still in communication with my stepfather. He knew I was in a financial crisis, and he knew my mother had money. He also has money, but he has absolved himself of any responsibility. So he took it upon himself to tell my mother that I was in Seattle and to tell her I needed money. Now, I've told you this whole story. Even if we just started me being in Rwanda, me needing money wasn't a new part of the conversation. That wasn't new information. She has money and refused to help me with it. That's okay. I am okay with that. And why he took it upon himself and then felt no way about it. But he is trying to use me again as a pawn or collateral damage, which for the record, she did not help. She did not help. I owed the woman in Los Angeles for a month of rent. I owed the security deposit for my subletter. I owed my stepsister $500 and my friend $1,000. $10,000 would have just been breaking even. Again, I'm not saying anybody owes me any money. I would rather figure out how to create financial stability on my own than be in financial codependence with anyone, including my mother, for the sake of jumping through hoops and bending over backwards and filling this martyr, sacrificial lamb role for money. Because we know it's only conditional. It only goes so far. It's never actually fully authentic or going to get my needs met. We know that, right? We know it's transactional. And what I had to learn, and I'm still learning, is how to create money, stability, resources on my own terms through my own gifts and devices. I've had feast and famine times in my business, and I'm learning how to do it now without any other infrastructure. But when I tell you, not having a support system of family is a particular kind of hell that I do not wish on anyone. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not great. I don't wish on anybody, but choosing myself and my health and my well-being over narcissistic neglect and blame shifting and lack of responsibility and lack of accountability and gaslighting and smear campaigns and having to play a role in order to be valid and valued, I will choose building my life of success and money and abundance brick by brick myself versus trying to be in that world. I've retired. When I had brain surgery in 2012, I had to learn how to walk again. I've healed and recovered and I'm fine now. But the way my mother would talk about it was that it was the hardest thing she had ever been through. It was the hardest thing that she had ever done. It was the hardest thing that she had ever experienced. Meanwhile, I'm learning how to walk again. Meanwhile, I have a hole in my skull. And she's saying it was the hardest thing she has ever been through. I started the GoFundMe in November. By March, the same person who said, you know, most people can't call people they know on city council. My brother and she had divorced, but we had stayed in touch intermittently throughout the years. She sends me a Facebook message in March asking if I needed anything. I just popped into her mind. Now, I know she saw my GoFundMe, but okay, girl.
On March 3rd, 2023, my former sister-in-law sent me a Facebook message at 6:08 p.m., 5 months after my very public GoFundMe. And she said, my sweet sister, I'm not sure I have your most current phone number, so I'm reaching out here. You popped in my head and I want to say hi. I see your post and your struggle. I love you and I'm here if you need anything. Now, me being the literal, honest, direct, straight up person took this message at face value. I see your post and your struggle. I love you and I'm here if you need anything. Mind you, she had not donated. She had not commented. She had not shared, which again, I don't expect anyone to do, but she had not. And this was my response. I responded on the very same day. Thanks, sis. I appreciate you always. My number is the same, redacted here, showing she hadn't tried to text or call or reach out. Feel free to reach out anytime. I got some tough medical news this week and have been stress processing it, so it's great to hear from you. All of these tests, I'd been going to the doctor, as I said, 3-5 times a week, and some of the tests came back with numbers that we did not want to see, and so I was still processing and digesting it. If you'd be willing to share my GoFundMe, I really appreciate it. Love you forever. Because she asked, I'm here if you need anything. She did not, in fact, share my GoFundMe. She didn't even respond to this message. What I received this same day, maybe by coincidence, but I have the feeling it was her, was a $150 GoFundMe donation from the name Jane Doe. The next message I received from her in Facebook was a year later, which was a response to one of my stories. And she said, sweet girl, you're gorgeous. Don't look at the weather starting Wednesday. I'm guessing was going to start raining. So she reached out to me on her own volition. I responded to what she asked me, and then I didn't hear from her for a year. I don't know why people are like this. I truly don't.
She reached out to me out of nowhere. I hadn't seen her or talked to her. She reached out to me asking me if I needed anything, told her what I needed, and she did not respond. But mysteriously that same day, I got a $150 donation to my GoFundMe from Jane Doe. So I don't know what kind of chokehold my mother had these people in. I don't know what kind of messages she's telling them. But when I tell you, if someone who reached out to me couldn't even feel confident and comfortable responding, but instead donated $150 under Jane Doe, and the only two family members that donated to my GoFundMe were two cousins, one I knew at Morehouse when I was at Spelman, and his brother, who I'm very appreciative and donated, but their parents didn't donate. Nobody I grew up in the village donated. My mother had done a complete smear campaign with them, completely discrediting them. And again, it did not matter if I lived or if I died. It didn't matter to them because they were believing my mother. And so what my mother's email says to me more than anything is that people asked her how I was doing. They didn't reach out to me. They didn't ask me. It's like they filtered my GoFundMe through her. But I haven't talked to her at that point in over 3 years. That's one. Two, they didn't even check on me. They took her word as gospel. No one who was my family, either biological or chosen, that I grew up with and raised me, checked on me. No one checked to see how my health was doing. They took my mother's word as the final and only word and were out. No one checked on me except for one elder who I deeply appreciate and I've seen since then, and she gets it, and I'm appreciative. People I went to middle school with who I hadn't seen or heard from in decades donated to my GoFundMe, and yet my family, my biological mother, refused. I'm so grateful for those who did. I'm so grateful that I have a reputation outside of my family, outside of my mother, outside of those relationships, because if I was depending on them to save my life when I actually was literally dying, we know how that would have gone, because that's how it went. I'm so grateful that I had other support systems, even virtually from afar, to have my back when my family did not. Meanwhile, two of kids from who are both younger than me, who I grew up with in the village, both Black excellence, both bougie Black people, blah, have passed away from who knows what, because they were not in active and close relationship with their parents. It's all a performance. It's all a persona. Having my own needs disrupted the role that I had been put in of martyr, of sacrificial lamb. Sacrificial lambs and martyrs don't have needs. They're just there for the service of the greater story and the greater good, which actually has nothing to do with them. The story that I will get, what I've always heard from my mom, is, I did so much for you. I let you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I paid for H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. You've always done this. You've always done that. But as I established before, I'm not talking about the material support or resources, and even those had strings attached. What I'm talking about is the emotional and the safety and the belonging. Dr. Ramani, who is a preeminent voice in the study of recovering from narcissistic neglect and abuse, has been instrumental for me. Her videos have been powerful and transformative for me. And this is what she says the role of a parent actually is.
The duties of a parent are to keep a child safe, loved, nurtured, seen, heard. That's the duties. And if a parent isn't doing that, they're not fulfilling the roles and responsibilities of that relationship. I hate to bring it down to such brass tacks because it sounds very unromantic when we think about like duties. Ugh. But when you enter a relationship, trust, safety, compassion, kindness, respect, those are our roles. Never going to happen in a narcissistic relationship. So when that doesn't happen, that qualifies as a betrayal.
No one wants to go no contact. I can't say and emphasize that enough. No one actually wants to go no contact. It is the last resort for self-preservation and safety. This is why with my mother, it's a long burn. This is why it took me years and years, decades to actually recognize. It's like walking into a spider web and not knowing where things are or how to get clear or how to take things off of your face, because it just feels like it's everywhere. And it takes time to recognize the toxicity, recognize the patterns, and remove yourself from it, because it's so subversive and it's so ingrained into everything. When you have a covert narcissist, it's not something you can actually pinpoint because it is woven into everything. And there's so many nuances. My sibling has always been the priority and the golden child, even though they were also the one causing the most harm and havoc. In 2017, my mother happened to be on my business email list, and I wrote an email that she was very offended by. And I could not find the original email. I may have deleted it in light of her screaming at me via email. But I remember I rewrote the email, which is actually why I'm not saying much about my siblings' identifiable markers in this video. I'm trying to keep it as neutral and vague as possible because of my mother's reaction to this email that I sent to my list, actually just telling my story and telling my truth about the abuse and the harm that I experienced growing up.
This is part of the larger email where I was telling my story, my experience, my life journey. On a summer day in the early 80s, my family was blessed with a new baby. Only a few years apart, we were close as children. But what no one knew was that she was living with a terrorizing, violent, unpredictable mental illness. All of the adults in the family were doing the best they could, but no one knew how to intervene, leaving me with more responsibility than I needed at a very early age. And the illness remained undiagnosed and unmedicated for decades. We were all unprepared and uncertain how to respond to the rage and unbridled fury that often manifested as screaming and terror and violence. This created a dynamic in which I learned at a very early age to take care of people who were abusive, emotionally irresponsible, and unable to return my love. But I want to be clear, because this story doesn't go where you think it might. I don't blame my ill family member for the trauma or the adults for not knowing how to handle it. Instead, I learned to own my pain and rage and grief and longing, harnessing them as tools for healing. I ended up traveling the world for years, working with healers and teachers and medicine people who could help me heal, take responsibility for my life, and come home to myself. The trauma of my childhood also ignited a profound desire for a loving connection with women who tell each other bold truths and hold witness for healing, a deep sisterhood in which we could support and celebrate each other. And that's how I ended up hearing the following sentence spoken in a room full of women who didn't know each other. Not only do I think that's a beautifully and well-written email, this is in 2017, so you know ChatGPT ain't have nothing to do with this. That is the words of brilliance from my own brain. But my mother's response email didn't say anything about the actual context or content of the email. She was focusing on her golden child being accurately described and the impact being accurately named. Instead, she wanted to yell at me via email. And I remember going to her house the evening that she saw the email that she did not like, the one I can't find. And she was so angry with me. She was like, you don't want me talking about your brain surgery to people, because I had asked her to stop showing my brain surgery scar to people as if I was a show and tell curio item. You don't want me talking about and showing your brain surgery scar to people. Why would you talk about your sibling on your email list? And again, the way this is written, it could be a cousin. This could be a play cousin. This could be anybody who would join the family. Her hypersensitivity is what was triggering it. And now, in retrospect, I realize I was still kind of in the haze and in the daze of we were all unprepared. We were all uncertain because I had been so parentified. I was still taking on responsibility and absolving my mother of her responsibility as the adult and the parent, which now I do not do. My response to her initial email, which I can't find, no one on my list knows my family or who I'm referring to. As far as they know, it could be a blood cousin, a play cousin, or anyone from childhood I claimed as family. Then I list a few names which have been redacted. I could be talking about anyone. You're the only one reading this letter with a magnifying glass, going through it with a fine-tooth comb. Other people are reading it to learn from and hear about me as a healer and are responding about how my experiences and lessons are applying to their lives. The only person centering my sibling's name, which is redacted, in this letter is you. I need ways to speak honestly about my truth without being vilified for it. I did my best to honor your preferences, and I think I've reached a reasonable compromise without finger pointing or quote unquote outing anyone. I understand we're all doing the best we can. Maybe one day you'll be able to honor my emotional and psychological experiences without explaining anything or centering my sibling's name redacted in response. In the meantime, I will continue moving forward with my healing. Instead of responding to what I actually wrote in the email, she decided to point out the parts where she thought that someone might be reading between the lines to understand who the harmful person was. And that's what she highlighted. On a summer day in the early 80s, my family was blessed with a new baby, highlighted. Only a few years apart, we were close as children, highlighted. But what no one knew was that she was living with a terrorizing, violent, unpredictable mental illness. Not highlighted, irrelevant to my mother. And her notes doesn't leave much doubt who you're talking about, but at this point, it is what it is. Didn't address the harm, the terrorizing, violent, unpredictable mental illness, or the impact that that had on me. As long as the idea that her golden child was being truthfully discussed in mixed company, that's what she wanted to highlight.
Notice in this response email, nothing is being said about the harm caused to me. Nothing, not a word. My mother's issue was that I named the harm. My response speaks to me beginning to take care of myself, create healthy boundaries. Now, after this happened, I took my mother off of my email list. And again, I didn't know the word narcissist at the time. I didn't have any of that languaging at the time. I just knew I was healing from trauma and it's okay for me to tell my own story. That's what I knew. And she didn't pay attention to or pick up that at all. Meanwhile, again, I told you what her professional work is. All of this is in her professional life. Told you she has a master's in spiritual psychology. I told you she's seen as a community leader doing this kinds of conflict resolution work. And meanwhile, she's focused on the wrong things. She is focused on the wrong things in this email exchange. Another example was when my sibling was having a baby. I was told that because we lived in Atlanta and my mother lived in Seattle, that I was going to need to be the stand-in grandparent in the absence of my mother. Yes, that's what she told me. The parentification, of course, continued. My sibling had moved out of the house that my mother had bought from us and cut off total contact with the whole family, including me, to go live with the person they're having a child with. Cut off complete contact. And yet I was simultaneously being told that it was my job to now be a co-parent for a baby I did not have, was not having, and intentionally would never have, because I don't want to have kids. I don't want to be a parent at all. I was then asked to come to the hospital for the delivery of the baby, which I did, of course. I'm happy to be there. When I arrived, my mother came out and told me that I was not allowed to be in the room because this isn't a party. She had me drive all the way out to a completely different area of Atlanta. If you live in Atlanta, you know it's a very big city. Completely different, and told me I could not come in because it's not a party after she had told me to come there. It's a classic bait and switch, a classic gaslighting. When I went no contact, I wasn't adding up all these experiences. This wasn't a cumulative addition. I wasn't like this. I'm going to go no contact, because as I said, no one wants to go no contact if they don't have to. No one. It's the absolute last resort. I went no contact, but it was not on purpose. I had broken up with this narcissistic psychopathic ex and was really placing my psyche back together. I couldn't get out of bed for like 6 months. I could literally barely function. My psyche was blown apart. I needed space to heal and recover. I was in Mexico and I kept establishing boundaries just for myself, for my own healing and recover, that my mother kept crossing. She kept crossing the boundary. And I kept building and fortifying new boundaries. Like, I'll call you soon. I will message you on this date. And she kept just pushing until finally I realized she didn't respect me or my boundaries. She was just going to do what she wanted to do. And that's when I realized, oh, I have to create a little bit more permanent. So I blocked her first on WhatsApp. Then I blocked her on Instagram. Then I blocked her because she was posting unhinged comments on my Instagram about completely inappropriate things, trying to track me down. And I was like, this is not okay. She enrolled my childhood best friend, who I had not talked to. She enrolled other people. I now know the language is flying monkeys, to come and try and contact me, ask why I wasn't calling her. She tried to say that I had been trafficked. And I'm like, ain't nobody want this 40-something-year-old Pune. Ain't nobody interested. I tell you, I promise you, ain't nobody trying to traffic me, 40-something-year-old in Mexico. She has been wintering in Mexico for 20 years. She knows that's not the case. Growing up in my household, we had a code word in the 80s because kidnapping was a very big thing. So if someone said, oh, your mom told me to come and pick you up, they would have to have a code word. I remember the code word. So I was like, this is the code word. I am not trafficked. I'm just setting boundaries. I'm just need some space to myself. And she kept crossing them and crossing. So with the revelation that she did not respect me or my boundaries, I was so spun out and my psyche was so blown apart and needed recovery time after my complete reality had been exploded. I needed space, and having boundaries were so unfamiliar to my mother. She accused me of all of these things instead of actually just checking on me, seeing how I was doing. Again, that I'm not in this. You two figure it out yourselves. When I juxtaposed that with this over anxious trying to get in contact with me, not to actually see how I was doing, just to have those strings, just to keep me in the cage, I realized, oh, she don't, again, care about me. Which now, in retrospect, looking at the pattern across my life, I can see it all coming to turn. Like, it's the same. She has not changed from when I'm 2 years old saying, I'll take care of you, mommy, to me saying, I need help, and her being like, I'm not in this. Figure it out yourself. Meanwhile, I'm going to gaslight you, and I'm going to tell people not to trust you. Meanwhile, but I realized I had to choose survival and self-preservation, because the only way that I was going to be in her good graces was to play whatever game she needed me to play, which was martyr, self-sacrificial, whatever I needed, the role I needed to play to be able to be the most accommodating to her needs, to her woundedness, to her inner child. I've been doing my own healing work for decades, right? I've been doing this. I've been doing my own healing work, and I'm a healing practitioner. I've been doing this, but I realized that my inner child was severely neglected, and things distinctly changed when I realized, oh, I'm out here by myself for real. Even as recently, my birthday was last week. I'm a Taurus Nation. Even as recently as last week, it was the first time in my entire life that my mother did not acknowledge my birthday. Even in the years before, with me being no contact, she would send a cash app with a little happy birthday note. Nothing this year. And I'm like, okay, I think I am officially dead to her. And I'm not saying that's an accomplishment. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I just think after 46 years, the first time not hearing from her, I feel like something is different. Something has changed. My mother has never seen me as an adult in my own right. And to be honest, I don't think she ever will. I don't know if she has the capacity. That's not for me to say. All I can go on is what she has and has not done. And she has not treated me as a sovereign, autonomous adult. Fast forward to October 2024. I've been back in Seattle 2 years, and I get an email from my mom, which, as I mentioned, her emails go to spam, but I check spam periodically just to make sure I'm not missing anything important. And in there, I see an email from her inviting me to go to winter in Mexico with her.
On October 31st, 2024, my mother sent me this very seemingly innocuous email. Hey, sweetie, I leave for San Pancho on December 2nd. Do you want to join me for a couple of weeks down there? My treat. I'd love to have that time with you. Now, to the naked eye, this looks like a inconsequential, sweet, innocent invitation to go spend some time together in Mexico. But knowing now the context of my life and my actual relationship with my mother, knowing that I haven't spoken to her in 6 years at this point, knowing that when I actually needed things to be her treat, she refused and sabotaged any of her friends helping me either, knowing that I have had to rebuild my finances from the bottom up for years. This is not an actual innocuous or inconsequential email. This offer has nothing to do with me. This has everything to do with her. Hey, sweetie, insinuates a sense of endearment and intimacy that we don't actually have. I leave for San Pancho on December 2nd. Meanwhile, it is October 31st, and we are in the same city for the next at least month, the same city where I have been since I came back to Seattle in 2024. And she has not reached out to spend time with me here, and yet she wants me to go to Mexico with her for a couple of weeks. Her treat implies that she knows I ain't got no money to go. So she wants it to be my treat, when really I would much more benefit from having that money spent on my financial obligations and responsibilities, which she doesn't ask me about. I would love to have that time with you. She only would love to have that time with me because the person that she used to go to Mexico with, she is no longer going to Mexico with. I showed this email to my friend when I received it, and she said, oh, she has shown this email to other people because she has to make it look good to the outside world. Her emails are airtight. There cannot be any way that anyone can look at it and actually see the reality of what's going on. They are airtight unless you know how to read between the lines of what's actually in front of you.
At first glance, it looks innocuous. It looks harmless. It looks like a warm, thoughtful, gentle invitation. But now you have more backstory and you have more context. And each line is a subtle gaslighting, as we can see. As they said in narcissistic abuse, hoovering. It's the dangling the carrot before the horse. Because she says, I'm going to Mexico. I'd love for you to join me. My treat. Which means she knows that I'm still financially rebuilding my life, financially recovering from surgery and medical care and medical crisis. Not in any of the follow-up emails has she ever asked me how I'm doing, how surgery went. Now, she has sent me WhatsApp messages telling me about her cataract surgery and her this treatment and what she's doing there. But I've never been asked, how am I doing? But this invitation comes and she says she would love to spend some time with me in Mexico. Meanwhile, we've been in the same city and are still in the same city for over 2 years. And she has not reached out to me to have a reconciliation conversation, to have a come to Jesus conversation, to even have tea and just be like, I just want to see how you're doing. We're in the same city. No, she wants me to go to Mexico with her, which I just didn't understand. I've lived in Mexico. She has wintered in Mexico for 20 years. I didn't get it. Then I come to find out that the person that she has gone to Mexico with for years, they had some kind of falling out. They're no longer kicking it like that. And so she needs a replacement because, as she said, throughout my youth that my job is to take care of her when she's older. And now I guess the time has come. So of course I did not respond to this email. Fast forward a few months later, I get a call from one of the village people who helped raise me. This happens to be the one where my sibling would go to their house when my mother couldn't handle it. And she says, your mother is looking for you because she needs some information from you. And I'm like, what's this about? You told me you ain't here. I'm not asking you for nothing. I don't know what you need. I don't know what you want. So I respond back via email. I heard that you need some information from me. And she says, I'm building a condo from the ground up in Mexico. And with all these planes going down, I need your passport information so that you can inherit it if anything happens to me. Right.
In February 2025, my mother sent me a message via text that showed up in my email that said, good news. I've been spending your inheritance and signed the paperwork today to purchase a brand new, in fact, it's being built, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2 entrances condo in San Pancho. My hope is that it will appreciate in value, thereby increasing your inheritance. I'll stay in one side of the condo when I'm here and rent the other side out. We'll have the space to stay when we all come down. Nerve-wracking experience, but I signed the papers today. I have a few more hurdles to jump and voila! I'm excited, though I was trying to contain my excitement until I knew for sure. Lack of money is not the issue and never has been and never will be. Meanwhile, I'm rebuilding my own financial resources brick by brick. She didn't ask how I was doing, if I needed anything, or if even this was the inheritance I wanted. Why call it my inheritance if it's actually just money that you're spending? It's not my inheritance. It's your money. So don't put me in the conversation. How my mother spends her money has nothing to do with me. It is not my inheritance. It is her money, and she's spending it the way that she wants to. But I'm spending your inheritance now is one of her catchphrases that she's always said throughout my entire life when she is rightfully spending her money on what she wants to spend it on. But don't keep making me part of the conversation. Just say you're spending your money on what you want to spend it on. It has nothing to do with me.
Again, to the naked eye, it looks harmless. But with the context of all this stuff, I'm like, we could let sleeping dogs lie, because truthfully, I have needed money and been so down bad. And I'm not telling nobody's business, but I do know that other of my siblings and nibblings have also been in similar financial situations and had to fend for themselves. It's not my business to tell. But meanwhile, my mother is spending her money, it's her money, building condos and jetting around the world, which again, I support, but let sleeping dogs lie. How you spend money ain't got nothing to do with me, but I send the passport information because really the only inheritance that I'm actually very interested in are my great grandmother's china, her dishes, her silverware, and her tea sets. That's all I want. My mom has art, original collector, all this stuff that I could want. I don't want any of that. I just want the legacy, the history. That's what I want. That's what I want. But no one asked me what I want. That's a theme, right? That's a theme running through. Because I didn't have any money when I came back, I sold my Farm Rio dresses, which like $300 dresses. I still have some, but I sold as many as I could sell. I sold my Selkie dresses, which $200 and something dresses, which thankfully have great resale value, because there was a time when I did have more money and was buying cute, high price tag dresses, building my finances back up brick by brick by brick on my own, not relying on my mother, not relying on her connections or her friendships, because we know when I actually needed it, when I was literally dying, when I was down for the count, no one cared. And no one came from that circle. It was mostly strangers or acquaintances on the internet. And when I was in Los Angeles, I did spend time with my 84-year-old cousin. We went to the cemetery together. We had lunch together. We spent time hanging out. He came over and I recorded him for my family records. And what I really appreciate is that he did not ask me once about my mom. He minded his business and he let us have our own sovereign relationship with each other. And that feels grown to me, that feels mature to me, that feels adult to me, and that I so deeply appreciate. We Black women are taught to never speak critically about our mothers, to never challenge how we were raised, to never ask for more or do things different. Doing so, we are taught, is a betrayal. It is the ultimate golden rule. But staying silent has its cost too. This video is your permission slip to not carry that silence any longer. I encourage you to give yourself permission to speak your truth and stop looking for validation from other people, because as I've showed you, a lot of people aren't going to do that. And the ones who do, they're the real ones. Those are the ones you cherish and you value and are important. But the others, they're going to do what's easier. They're going to stick with the cult. They're going to stick with the dominant figure. Let them have it. Let them have it. It was easy for them to write me off because I've always been seen as rogue. I've always gone my own way. And my mom has a stellar reputation. I can't fight 50 years of a stellar reputation. I can't do it. I'm going to be myself. And the ones who are for me, and the ones who aren't. This is my life. I have over 46 years of stories to tell. So I'm not going to tell you every story in every nook and cranny, but I hope I've given you a good sampling of what I'm talking about and why it's so subversive. Even going through all of my receipts was difficult because the messages are so subversive. They're so hidden. And I felt triggering reading them because I knew what she was saying. I knew what she wasn't saying. If any random Joe Blow just looked at the email exchange, it would look like my mother's just this generous, kind, thoughtful, benevolent woman. That's how her public persona presents as well, right? But we have to know the actual inner workings, which she has been very good and very deliberate and very intentional at keeping the public persona separate from the private behind the scenes reality. Even in preparing for this video, I was asking myself if I was exaggerating or making a big deal out of nothing. And of course, that's my mother's voice, right? That's not mine, but the hard wiring, the conditioning, the self-gaslighting is still there. I really want to encourage you to unsubscribe from the cultural pressure of looking perfect or excelling or preserving for appearances. Choose emotional integrity and well-being and alignment over public performance, because that's what ultimately matters at the end of the day. That's what's sustainable at the end of the day. That's what makes life feel good at the end of the day, not all these external performances. And that is why I call myself a Black excellence defector, because Black excellence is all about the persona and all about the perfection and not actually the authenticity. And again, for the record, if you've never heard me say it, I love Black people and I love excellence. That is not Black excellence. Black excellence is its own thing that is a response to white supremacist domination and delusions. Yes, of course, I miss my mother. She's a dope human being. We have a good time together. She's a visionary. She's creative. She's warm. She's charismatic. She's very likable. She's very charming. She's incredible qualities. She comes from a village in Texas that has to this date been no larger than 1,500 people. And she created an incredible life and continued the legacy of multi-generational Black excellence. And for that, I am forever grateful. It's not about those kinds of things. I understand the challenges of her life because I was deeply conditioned to be compassionate for her from a very young age. But having compassion and understanding her journey doesn't negate, absolve, or excuse her negligence. It's about not feeling safe. Despite having a master's in spiritual psychology and access to therapy and being a great human being, my mother consistently chose not to be accountable or make any real change within our family unit. I'm not talking about persona. I'm not talking about braces. I'm not talking about private school. I'm not talking about going skiing. I'm not talking about trips to Mexico. I'm talking about the family dynamic. The toxic dynamic within our family did not change, and she chose not to be accountable to change it. Her denial and her avoidance were not predestined, and they are not generational limitations. They were a choice that she made. I've always understood my mother's pain, her backstory, her trauma. I had compassion. I've over-indexed on compassion, but it did not protect me. It did not keep me safe. I've had to choose self-protection and authenticity and well-being and myself over and over and over again. And because I was raised by a single mom, I don't have a paternal family at all. It was just us until my mom got remarried when I was 16 years old, and they're not together anymore. I don't have that family support system. So it was a big and hard and grueling decision, and choosing myself is always, always, always the best. This story, my story, is offering to my inner child and to all the women, Black in particular, but not exclusively, who have been gaslit and neglected and silenced, I want you to know you are not crazy. You are not alone. You are not making this up, and you do not have to carry it anymore. But it's a lot to unhook. It's a lot to decondition from. It's a lot. My work is ultimately about helping you create the life that you desire from the inside out. It's always trauma informed. So if you have a narcissistic mother or you've gone no contact, I understand your journey and I help you create the life that you want from the inside out. Check out one-on-one below, the alignment hour, as well as Success Reset one-on-one coaching programs down below. I didn't know how to talk about this publicly, but a few weeks ago, I was on Stephanie Perry's YouTube channel. I will put a link in the description below talking about burnout and recovery from burnout and support systems. I didn't even know it was going to come up in the conversation. But one of the things I ended up saying was, if you are no contact, you need even more extreme and heightened support system because we don't have it. We are our own support system, and that is unhealthy and that is unnatural. I will put the link for that video in the description. The healing work that Dr. Ramani has provided for me, there's another video that I'll link below that I watched by Patrick Tihan, who is a therapist and also talks a lot about trauma, no contact, narcissism, toxic parents. And the video is called How Parents React to No Contact. Bar for bar, word for word, that is my experience. The self-victimizing, the blaming, the blame shifting, the smear campaign. If this at all resonates with you or sounds like your experience, I will put the link below. I strongly recommend that you watch it. Dr. Ramani has a video talking about becoming whole again after betrayal. It resonated with me so deeply. So I will put the link below of that video as well, because parental narcissism is betrayal, because you are here to feel safe. You're here to feel connected. You're here to feel loved. You're here to be protected. You're here to be taken care of. And when that doesn't happen with your parent, and you're blamed and you're scapegoated and you're held responsible for your parents' emotional well-being or your siblings' well-being at your own risk and well-being, that is a ultimate fundamental and formative betrayal. So I'll put the link below for that video. I will also put links to 2 books which have been incredibly helpful for me on this journey. Will I Ever Be Good Enough? Healing the Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers, and Mothers Who Can't Love, a healing guide for daughters. I'll put both of those links in the description below. I'll also put links for a panel that I was on recently, having difficult and complicated relationships with our mother. It was a panel of all Black women, and 3 of 4 of us are no contact with our mothers. And that is on Dr. Kimani's channel. And that video is called When Mother's Day Hurts: Honoring Your Truth in a Complicated Relationship. I will also put the link for that below. I've also found the Healing Daughter YouTube very helpful. She helps daughters of narcissistic mothers break the cycle and create boundaries and build the lives that we want. I found her channel very helpful, so I'll also put the link to that below. Also find Danny Went No Contact, who's a Black woman who talks about going no contact with her mother. She's very helpful, and she was on the panel, and I will put her YouTube channel link also in the description below. This took a lot for me to prepare for this conversation and to have it, so I'm very honored that you're here and you watched until the very end. Thank you again. Really hope continued healing and blessings on your journey. If you are not the bad guy, you are not the sacrificial lamb, you are not the martyr, and you are not collateral damage. There is a huge stigma, especially for Black women and girls, to go no contact or to have boundaries or even to be critical of our mothers in any form, shape, or capacity. But you deserve it. Tell the truth to yourself over and over again until you remember that that is the truth of your experience, not the gaslighting, not the blame shifting, not the fault finding. But your truth is real and valuable and valid. I hope that sharing my story was helpful for affirming your own. If you want to know more about why I'm a Black excellence defector and how I have chosen my well-being over any of society's expectations, watch this video right here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye for now.